There is a specific kind of emotional fatigue that comes from giving more than you receive. You stay available. You stay patient. You try to understand. You keep showing up with good intentions, even when the connection feels unstable. Something never fully settles, but you keep hoping it will. Over time, that hope turns into confusion. You start doubting your instincts. You wonder if asking for clarity is too much. You tell yourself to wait a little longer, be more understanding, and stay calm. Meanwhile, the effort stays uneven, and the emotional weight keeps growing. This video is for people who have lived through that experience. Not because you lacked strength, not because you were careless, but because you trusted words that sounded harmless and behavior that was never consistent. Narcissistic women rarely show manipulation in obvious ways. They do not need drama or open cruelty. They rely on simple language, common words, words that sound polite, flexible, and reasonable. These words keep you emotionally invested while slowly draining your energy. In this video, you will learn the 4 words narcissistic women often use before they start using you. You will also understand the communication patterns behind those words and what they are designed to do. Most importantly, you will learn how to respond in a way that protects your emotional well-being and helps you regain control. This is not about blame or anger. This is about clarity, self-respect, and moving forward with strength. How narcissistic communication really works. Narcissistic communication rarely feels aggressive or hostile. It often feels calm, controlled, and even reasonable. That is why it is easy to miss. Nothing sounds extreme enough to justify walking away. There is no obvious conflict. Instead, there is a steady sense that something is always unresolved. This keeps you emotionally engaged because your mind keeps trying to reach a sense of stability that never fully arrives. A narcissistic woman usually avoids speaking in clear terms about what she wants or where things are going. Clear statements would lock her into expectations. Flexibility gives her freedom to change direction whenever it benefits her. She can stay close when she wants attention and pull back when responsibility appears. This creates a one-sided dynamic where you adapt while she stays in control. You may notice the communication feels uneven. Responses come when it suits her, not when consistency would require them. Sometimes she is present and warm. Other times, she becomes distant with no explanation. This shift is confusing because it prevents you from knowing where you stand. You start paying attention to timing, tone, and small changes instead of looking at the pattern as a whole. Another key feature is how emotional closeness is used in short bursts. Warm moments appear just long enough to keep you attached. These moments feel meaningful because they interrupt long stretches of distance. Over time, your emotional focus shifts. You begin valuing these brief moments more than you should, even though they never lead to real progress or security. Responsibility is quietly avoided through language that leaves room for interpretation. Nothing is stated in a way that can be clearly held accountable. This allows her to deny intent later if needed. You are left managing expectations on your own. The emotional burden shifts onto you, while she remains comfortable and unchallenged. When you try to bring up consistency or clarity, the response often feels off. The conversation may stall, shift topics, or create distance. This is not accidental. Clear communication limits control. Boundaries reduce flexibility. When flexibility disappears, the dynamic no longer works in her favor, so resistance appears in subtle ways. Over time, this style of communication changes how you think. You begin to question your reactions. You hesitate before expressing needs. You worry about pushing too hard or asking for too much. This self-doubt does not come from insecurity. It comes from being in a system where clarity is always withheld and resolution never arrives. What matters most is understanding that this pattern serves a purpose. It is not random. It keeps attention flowing in one direction while commitment stays absent. Once you see the structure behind the confusion, the language loses its power. You stop reacting to individual moments and start recognizing the pattern that created them. The word busy. When a narcissistic woman uses the word busy, it often signals a shift in how much access you are allowed to have. It is less about time and more about control. This word creates distance without ending the connection. You are still expected to stay interested, but your presence becomes optional. That imbalance slowly changes how you see your role in the connection. Busy is useful because it sounds reasonable. Everyone has responsibilities. That makes it hard to challenge. You may tell yourself to be understanding or patient. Over time, you stop expecting consistency. You begin working around her availability instead of noticing that effort is not being returned at the same level. This word also allows her to stay unaccountable. If she responds late, cancels plans, or avoids making plans at all, busy covers everything. There is always an excuse ready. Nothing has to be explained. This keeps you from addressing the pattern directly, because each moment feels isolated instead of connected. As this continues, your behavior starts to change. You become more flexible. You hesitate before reaching out. You accept short replies. You wait longer than you want to. None of this happens because you want less. It happens because you are adjusting to what is being offered instead of what you need. Emotionally, this creates a slow drain. You may feel unsettled without knowing why. You feel invested, but not grounded. Your mood may begin to depend on small moments of attention. That is not because those moments are meaningful, but because they interrupt long periods of distance and uncertainty. Another effect of busy is that it places the burden on you to stay connected. If you pull back, the connection fades. If you stay, you do most of the work. This dynamic benefits her because she receives attention without having to prioritize you. The relationship becomes something you maintain rather than something you share. Over time, this pattern can weaken self-respect. You may start believing that asking for consistency is unreasonable. You may compare yourself to her schedule instead of your own standards. This is not a personal failure. It is the result of staying in a dynamic where effort is uneven, but never openly addressed. The way forward is not confrontation. Explaining how you feel often leads to more distance or more vague reassurance. The shift happens when your actions change. You stop overextending. You match effort instead of compensating for absence. You stop organizing your emotional life around someone else's availability. When you no longer treat limited access as something to chase, the dynamic changes. Either effort increases or the connection fades. Both outcomes protect your emotional health. Busy only works when you keep waiting. Once you stop waiting, the word loses its power. The word maybe. Maybe often sounds polite and non-threatening. It feels like the conversation is still open. Nothing is being shut down. That is exactly why it is effective. In narcissistic dynamics, maybe is used to delay reality. It keeps things undecided while still keeping you emotionally involved. You are left waiting without knowing what you are waiting for. This word places you in a passive position. You cannot move forward because there is no clear yes. You hesitate to move on because there is no clear no. Your time stays available. Your attention stays focused. Meanwhile, she does not have to make a choice or take responsibility for the direction of the connection. As time passes, uncertainty becomes normal. You start organizing your plans around something that might happen. You stay flexible just in case. You avoid fully committing to other options because you do not want to close a door that feels half open. This is how emotional energy gets stuck in one place without any real return. Another effect of maybe is how it shifts power quietly. She holds the decision. You wait for it. That imbalance can slowly affect how you see yourself. You may begin to feel less confident asking for clarity. You may tell yourself that patience will eventually pay off, even when nothing changes. This pattern benefits anyone who wants attention without obligation. As long as you stay available, there is no pressure to decide. The connection continues on her terms. Your needs remain secondary, not because they are unimportant, but because they are never addressed directly. The healthiest response does not require a conversation or an explanation. It happens through behavior. You treat maybe as information, not a promise. You stop placing your time and emotional focus on something undefined. You move forward with your life instead of waiting for permission. When you do this, emotional leverage disappears. Waiting creates attachment. Action creates balance. Whether she becomes more direct or fades away, you gain clarity, and clarity always puts you back in control. The word friend. When a narcissistic woman calls you a friend in this situation, it often changes the dynamic without saying it out loud. The label sounds harmless, even respectful, but it quietly defines what you are allowed to expect. You are close enough to stay useful, but not close enough to ask for more. That line protects her comfort, not your emotional needs. In this role, you are often expected to listen, support, and be available. You show up when she is stressed, confused, or emotional. Your presence helps her feel understood and validated. At the same time, your own needs are rarely addressed with the same care. The connection moves in one direction, even if it feels warm at times. What makes this dynamic confusing is that it can feel meaningful on the surface. You share personal conversations. You may feel trusted. That sense of closeness makes it harder to notice that there is no real exchange. Emotional effort is coming mostly from you, while commitment or deeper connection never follows. Over time, this imbalance affects how you feel about yourself. You may start wondering why you are giving so much without receiving the same level of care. You may feel guilty for wanting more, even though what you want is basic respect and consistency. That guilt often keeps people stuck longer than they should be. This setup benefits someone who wants emotional access without responsibility. She can rely on you when it suits her and step back whenever it does not. Because the relationship is labeled as friendship, any desire for more can be dismissed or ignored without discussion. That keeps everything on her terms. Another quiet effect is emotional exhaustion. You may feel drained after conversations, but still feel pulled to stay. You may sense resentment building, but push it down to avoid conflict or loss. This internal tension is a sign that the connection is not balanced, even if it looks calm from the outside. Reducing access is not about being cold or unkind. It is about protecting your emotional energy. When you stop offering constant support and availability, the structure of the connection changes. Without free emotional labor, the true level of investment becomes visible very quickly. Sometimes this leads to a shift in how you are treated. Other times, the connection fades. Both outcomes bring clarity. A relationship that only survives when you give more than you receive is not sustainable. Stepping back is how you regain balance and self-respect. Being a friend should never mean ignoring your own needs. Real friendship includes mutual care, honesty, and respect. When those things are missing, distance is not punishment, it is self-protection. The word, soon. When a narcissistic woman says, soon, it sounds reassuring at first. It feels like progress is coming. It feels like patience will be rewarded. But over time, you notice nothing actually moves forward. There is no clear date, no clear plan, and no follow-through. The word exists to slow things down without changing anything that matters. Soon is often used when you start feeling uncomfortable with the lack of effort. It smooths things over just enough to keep you from pulling away. Your concern gets acknowledged, but not resolved. This allows her to avoid action while still keeping your attention and emotional investment intact. What makes this word so powerful is that it shifts your focus away from the present. Instead of noticing how little is happening right now, you start thinking about what might happen later. Your mind stays busy with future possibilities instead of present behavior. That mental shift keeps you attached, even when your needs are not being met. As time goes on, waiting becomes part of the routine. You give more chances. You extend more patience. You tell yourself that timing is the issue, not priority. This slowly trains you to accept less while expecting more later. The gap between words and actions grows, but you are encouraged to ignore it. Another effect of soon is that it delays accountability. If nothing is defined, nothing can be questioned. When you feel disappointed, there is always another vague reassurance ready. The conversation resets without any real change. This keeps the cycle going, while your frustration quietly builds. Emotionally, this can be draining. You may feel stuck, restless, or unsettled without knowing why. You are investing energy into something that stays unfinished. Your life pauses around a promise that never becomes real. This is not because you lack patience. It is because patience is being used against you. The shift happens when you stop responding to timelines and start responding to actions. Words about the future lose meaning when they are not backed by behavior in the present. You do not need to argue or demand. You simply stop organizing your time and emotions around something undefined. When soon no longer keeps you waiting, its power disappears. Either real effort shows up, or the connection fades. Both outcomes give you clarity, and clarity frees you from living in constant anticipation. Consistency is not something you ask for repeatedly. It is something you observe. When plans are real, they are clear. When interest is genuine, it shows up now, not later. Recognizing this protects your emotional energy and helps you move forward with confidence. The core message: protection, not manipulation. The most important thing to understand is that harmful dynamics usually show themselves early through language. Long before behavior becomes clearly disrespectful, the words already signal what role you are being placed in. When language stays vague, delayed, or one-sided. It is not accidental. It reflects how much responsibility the other person is willing to take. Paying attention to this early protects you from long-term emotional damage. This is not about trying to outsmart or control anyone. Manipulating back only keeps you stuck in the same unhealthy pattern. The real shift happens when you stop playing the game altogether. You stop reacting emotionally to unclear messages. You stop trying to decode meaning from empty reassurance. You choose calm observation over emotional urgency, and that alone changes the balance. Protection starts with behavior, not confrontation. You do not need to explain why something feels off. You do not need to convince anyone of your value. When communication lacks clarity, your response becomes clarity through action. You reduce engagement. You slow down investment. You stop giving more than you receive. This is not punishment. It is self-respect in practice. Boundaries are not loud statements or long conversations. They are quiet decisions about what you allow access to. When you stop responding to mixed signals with extra effort, the situation becomes honest very quickly. Either consistency appears or distance does. Both outcomes give you information you can trust without draining your emotional energy further. Another key shift is learning to trust patterns instead of promises. Words can sound caring, while behavior stays unchanged. Patterns show the truth over time. When attention only appears on certain terms, when effort is uneven, or when clarity is avoided, those patterns matter more than explanations. Accepting this helps you stop hoping for change that never arrives. Emotional self-respect grows when you no longer abandon yourself to maintain connection. You begin choosing stability over excitement and consistency over uncertainty. You feel calmer because you are no longer waiting for someone else to decide your worth. That calm is a sign that you are acting in alignment with your needs, not reacting to someone else's control. Walking away from unclear dynamics does not mean you failed. It means you learned. It means you recognized that your time and energy matter. When you protect your emotional space, you create room for connections that feel steady, mutual, and grounded. That is not something you chase. It is something you allow by refusing to settle for less. And as always, because YouTube's algorithm tends to favor videos with strong engagement, if you feel this video has brought you value, a simple like and a quick subscribe would mean so much. It not only helps this message reach more people who need it, but also ensures you will never miss the next video that could make a difference in your journey. Thanks all